My name is Brett, and this is a story of how Christmas morning became the most satisfying day of my life. The irony wasn't lost on me as I sat in that living room, surrounded by torn wrapping paper and the smug faces of my in-laws. Just 2 years ago, I'd been the guy who believed love could conquer all, the hopeful fool who thought that if I just tried hard enough, I could win over a family that had decided I wasn't good enough before they'd even met me. But that morning, watching Angela approach me with that perfectly wrapped envelope and that predatory smile, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. She had no idea what was coming. Let me take you back to where it all began. I met Angela on a Tuesday that changed everything. She'd walked into my auto shop with a knocking engine and an attitude that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. Her usual mechanic was booked. She explained with barely concealed disdain, as if my small business was some kind of desperate last resort. "How long will this take?" she'd asked, checking her phone for the third time in 2 minutes. "Depends on what I find," I'd replied, already sensing the type of woman she was: successful, impatient, accustomed to getting her way. What I found was a loose belt tensioner, a 15-minute fix that somehow turned into a 40-minute conversation. By the time her car was purring like new, something had shifted. The way she looked at me when I handed back her keys, like she was seeing me for the first time, should have been my first warning. Angela was beautiful in that polished, untouchable way that comes from money and confidence. She worked for a tech firm downtown, wore clothes that cost more than most people's rent, and had never gotten her hands dirty in her life. I was a guy who owned a small auto shop, whose idea of dressing up was putting on a clean shirt. We shouldn't have worked, but somehow we did, for a while. Those early months were intoxicating. Angela was drawn to what she called my authenticity, the way I could fix anything with my hands, how I didn't need to check my phone every 5 minutes, how I found joy in simple things. I was a rebellion against the cookie-cutter corporate world she lived in. I was drawn to her ambition, her intelligence, the way she could command a room just by walking into it. She made me want to be better, to reach higher, to prove that a guy like me could be worthy of a woman like her. The sex was incredible. The conversations lasted until dawn. She'd show up at my shop during lunch breaks, perching on my workbench in her designer suits while I worked, asking questions about engines like she genuinely cared. Those moments felt stolen, precious, like we were conspirators in our own love story. But then I met her family. The first dinner at the Morrison household was an execution disguised as a meet and greet. Angela's mother, Patricia, greeted me with the kind of smile that never reached her eyes, the practiced politeness of someone who'd already made up her mind. "So, Brett," she'd said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "Angela tells us you work with cars." Not that I was a small business owner. Not that I'd built something from nothing. That I work with cars, like I was some grease monkey she'd picked up at a gas station. Her father, Richard, was worse. He said nothing, just watched me with a calculating gaze of a man who'd spent his life in boardrooms, sizing up opponents. His silence was louder than any insult. Angela's younger sister, Sarah, at least had the decency to be openly hostile. "How? Interesting," she'd said when Angela introduced me, her tone suggesting it was anything but. I'd gone into that dinner, hoping to win them over. I'd researched their interests, prepared conversation topics, even worn my best suit. But within the first hour, I realized the truth. It didn't matter what I said or did. In their eyes, I was a mistake their daughter was making, a phase she'd eventually outgrow. Angela noticed my discomfort, but brushed it off. "They'll come around," she'd whispered in the car afterward, her hand on my thigh. "They just need time to get to know you." But time only made things worse. The shift, the change in Angela didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, like a slow leak in a tire. Barely noticeable at first, then impossible to ignore. It started with small things. She'd correct my grammar in front of people. She'd suggest I upgrade my wardrobe, my car, my ambitions. When I get excited about landing a big repair job, she'd nod with the kind of patronizing smile you give a child who'd just shown you a crayon drawing. "That's great, honey," she'd say, but her eyes would already be back on her phone, scrolling through emails from her real world, the world where she was climbing the corporate ladder with frightening speed. The promotions came fast. First, she was a project manager, then a senior project manager, then director of operations. Each promotion came with longer hours, bigger responsibilities, and a growing sense that our little life together was holding her back. I tried to be supportive. I'd cook dinner and keep it warm when she worked late. I'd listen to her vent about office politics and difficult clients. I'd celebrate her victories like they were my own because, in my mind, we were a team. But teamwork requires two people. And somewhere along the way, Angela had started playing a different game. The pregnancy that never was. The breaking point came disguised as hope. Angela had been experiencing symptoms, nausea, fatigue, mood swings. We'd been trying to conceive for months, so when she suggested we take a test, my heart soared. I remember holding her hand in that sterile doctor's office, both of us vibrating with nervous energy. I'd already started imagining our future, teaching our kid to throw a baseball, helping with homework, being the kind of father who was present in ways my own hadn't been. But the test was negative. Dr. Martinez, a kind woman with gentle eyes, delivered the news with practiced compassion. "I know this is disappointing," she said, "but I'd like to discuss some lifestyle factors that might be affecting your fertility." What followed was a conversation that should have been a wake-up call. Dr. Martinez explained how chronic stress, the kind that comes from working 70-hour weeks and never truly disconnecting, could wreak havoc on a woman's reproductive system. "Your body needs to feel safe to create life," she said, looking directly at Angela. "Right now, it's in survival mode." I watched my wife's face as the doctor spoke, waiting for the moment of recognition, the acknowledgement that maybe she needed to slow down. Instead, I saw her jaw tighten, her walls go up. The drive home was silent. Not the comfortable silence of two people processing together, but the cold silence of two people who just realized they wanted different things. That night, I tried to broach the subject gently. "Maybe we should talk about what the doctor said," I suggested, reaching for her hand across the dinner table. Angela's response was swift and brutal. "Don't you dare use this as an excuse to try to control my career," she snapped, jerking her hand away. "I've worked too hard to get where I am to throw it away, because you can't handle having a successful wife." The accusation hit like a physical blow. "This isn't about your success," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "It's about us, about the family we said we wanted." "My parents were right about you," she said, her voice cold as winter. "You're intimidated by strong women. You want me to be some barefoot and pregnant housewife who'll make you feel like a big man." I stared at her, this woman I'd loved, who just weaponized her family's opinion of me like a knife to the heart. "That's not fair, and you know it." "Is it?" she challenged. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're looking for any excuse to tear me down." That night, I lay in bed next to my wife and realized I was sleeping next to a stranger. After that fight, something fundamental shifted between us. Angela threw herself even deeper into her work, as if proving a point I'd never asked her to make. She started coming home later, leaving earlier, spending weekends at the office or networking events that seemed to multiply by the week. I tried to bridge the gap, but every attempt was met with cold indifference or outright hostility. She criticized my clothes, my conversation, my ambitions. She'd compare me to her colleagues' husbands, men who made six figures and wore suits to work. "Marcus just bought Jennifer a new BMW," she'd say, scrolling through social media. "Must be nice to have a husband who's actually ambitious." The jabs became constant, each one designed to chip away at my self-worth. I started staying late at the shop, not because I had to, but because going home meant facing the woman who'd once loved me and now seemed to barely tolerate my existence. Our sex life died a slow, painful death. When I tried to initiate intimacy, she claimed she was too tired, too stressed, too busy. But I'd hear her on the phone late at night, laughing with people from work, her voice animated in ways it never was with me anymore. I began to suspect, but I didn't want to believe it. The truth came to me on a Tuesday night in November. Angela had come home late again, claiming she'd been in back-to-back meetings. She'd barely acknowledged me, just mumbled something about being exhausted, and headed straight to bed. I'd been in the living room, nursing a beer and watching the news when I heard it, the soft ping of a text message from the bedroom. Then another, and another. When I went to check on her, I found Angela fast asleep, her phone still clutched in her hand, the screen glowing with new messages. The responsible thing would have been to simply plug it in and let her sleep, but something in my gut told me to look. The messages were from someone named David Chun, her colleague who'd been calling at odd hours and monopolizing her time. But these weren't work messages. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same hotel. Tell me you're going to leave him soon. I hate sneaking around like this. You deserve so much better than what you have at home. I scrolled up, my hand shaking as I read months of messages. Plans for secret meetings. Intimate conversations about their future together. Discussions about how to handle the divorce. The worst part wasn't betrayal. It was a realization that while I'd been fighting for our marriage, she'd been planning its funeral. I took screenshots. Every conversation, every photo, every plan they'd made behind my back. Then I put the phone back in her hand and walked out of the room. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the evidence of my wife's betrayal, and felt something inside me turn to stone. The preparation. I didn't confront Angela immediately. Instead, I got smart. I contacted a lawyer, a private investigator, and started building a case. If my wife wanted to play games, I'd play to win. The investigator's report came back with photos and video evidence that removed any doubt. Angela wasn't just having an emotional affair. She was living a double life, complete with hotel rooms and weekend getaways she told me were work trips. But I still needed more. I needed her to show her true colors in a way that couldn't be disputed. One evening, I suggested marriage counseling. Angela's response was immediate and vicious. I'm not wasting my time sitting in some therapist's office so you can feel better about yourself, she snarled. Our marriage is over, Brett. The only question is whether you're going to accept it with dignity or make this ugly. I was recording the conversation. So you're saying you have no interest in trying to save our marriage? I asked, keeping my voice level. What marriage? She laughed bitterly. We haven't been married in months. We're just two people stuck in the same house, pretending for the sake of appearances. And David Chun? Where does he fit into this? The look on her face was everything I needed. Guilt, anger, and something like relief that she'd finally been caught. You been spying on me? She asked, her voice dangerously quiet. I've been trying to understand why my wife has been lying to me for months. I replied, but I think I have my answer now. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. Instead, she attacked. You want to know the truth? She said, her voice rising. David makes me feel alive in ways you never could. He's ambitious, successful, going places. He doesn't spend his days covered in grease, dreaming small dreams. Each word was calculated to wound, and they did. But they also gave me exactly what I needed. The setup, I filed for divorce 3 days before Thanksgiving, but I didn't serve the papers immediately. I had a better plan. Christmas at the Morrison house was a tradition Angela treasured. It was her chance to play the perfect daughter, surrounded by the family who'd always believed she was too good for me. This year, it would be her stage for performance of a lifetime. I spent the weeks leading up to Christmas playing the role of the oblivious husband. I acted hurt and confused by her distance, asked if everything was okay, even suggested we plan a romantic getaway for New Year. Angela ate it up, probably thinking I was too stupid to see what was happening right in front of me. The night before Christmas Eve, I packed a small black box with everything I collected. Divorce papers, photographs, USB drives containing video evidence, and a detailed timeline of her affair. I wrapped it carefully, even included a bow. If she wanted to make a public spectacle of our divorce, I'd give her one she'd never forget. Christmas morning. Christmas morning at the Morrison house was exactly as I'd expected. Patricia had outdone herself with the decorations. The table groaned under the weight of an elaborate breakfast, and everyone was dressed in their holiday finest. I'd barely slept, but I felt more awake than I had in months. This was it, the moment I'd been planning for weeks. Angela was in her element, playing the perfect daughter, accepting compliments on her success, her appearance, her bright future. She kept shooting me glances, checking to see if I was playing along with the charade. I was, but not the way she thought. After breakfast, we gathered in the living room for presents. I watched as Angela distributed gifts to her family, each one carefully chosen and expensive. She was saving mine for last. I could tell by the way she kept glancing at the envelope on the side table. Finally, she stood up, smoothing her dress with theatrical precision. "I have something special for Brett," she announced, her voice carrying that fake sweetness I'd learned to recognize. "It's something I've been working on for a while." She handed me the envelope with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Around us, her family leaned forward, clearly in on whatever was about to happen. I opened it slowly, already knowing what I'd find. Divorce papers, filed just days earlier. As I read, I heard Patricia's sharp intake of breath, followed by what sounded suspiciously like a stifled laugh. "Well," Angela asked, her voice carrying a note of triumph, "what do you think?" I looked up at her, then at her family, all of them watching me with barely concealed anticipation. They thought they were about to witness my humiliation. Instead, I smiled. "That's funny," I said, my voice steady. "I got you something, too." I reached behind my chair and pulled out the small black box. Angela's confidence flickered for just a moment, confusion replacing her earlier certainty. "Go ahead," I said, extending the box toward her. "Open it." She took it hesitantly, her fingers fumbling with the ribbon. The room fell silent as she lifted the lid. The change in her expression was immediate and devastating. All the color drained from her face as she saw the contents. My own divorce papers, already filed and signed, sitting on top of printed photographs that left nothing to the imagination. "There's a USB drive in there, too," I said conversationally. "The videos are quite illuminating." The silence in the room was deafening. Angela's hand shook as she stared at the evidence of her betrayal, made tangible and undeniable. "How did you—" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "How did I what?" I asked, standing up slowly. "How did I find out about your affair? How did I document it? How did I prepare for this moment?" I looked around the room at her family, their faces frozen in shock and horror. "I may not have been what you wanted for your daughter," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "But I was loyal. I was faithful. I was everything a husband should be. And in return, she humiliated me, lied to me, and threw away our marriage for a man who saw her as nothing more than a conquest." I moved toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "Merry Christmas, Angela. I'll see you in court." The last thing I heard as I walked out was the sound of Angela's sobs, finally understanding that her perfect plan had just exploded in her face. The aftermath. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Angela tried to paint me as controlling and emotionally abusive, but the evidence spoke louder than her accusations. The photos, the messages, the recordings, they told a story of a woman who'd systematically destroyed her marriage while planning her escape. Because of Angela's significantly higher income and the proof of her adultery, the settlement was heavily in my favor. She was ordered to pay me substantial spousal support, and I walked away with more than half of our assets. The calls started immediately after the final decree. Angry voicemails, bitter texts, attempts to blame me for everything that had gone wrong. I didn't respond to any of them. Eventually, I changed my number. 6 months later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Angela and David had broken up. Apparently, he'd gotten cold feet about the whole thing once the divorce was final, and he realized he'd actually have to follow through on his promises. As for me, I'm rebuilding. The shop is doing better than ever, and I've learned to value myself in ways I never did when I was trying to be worthy of someone else's love. Sometimes, people ask me if I regret how I handled things, if I think I should have tried harder to save the marriage, or if I feel bad about the way it ended. The answer is simple. I regret nothing. Angela made her choice long before that Christmas morning. I just made sure that when she tried to humiliate me, she got exactly what she deserved, and that, more than any gift I could have given her, was the perfect Christmas present